it was recently reported, last Wednesday, I believe, that the commander of Israel's Southern Command, Major General Yaron Finkelman, gave explicit orders to Israeli soldiers during the ceasefire that they must go out and by way in order to delete and paint over graffiti drawn by Israeli soldiers on buildings in Gaza, saying things such as "Nekama," revenge, or quoting a pasuk, a verse from the Torah, such as "Shema Yisrael," Hear O Israel, the Lord our God is one, or things along those lines, that they must go out and endanger themselves, wandering around with spray paint, in order to
you can't make this up. You can't make this up.
You couldn't. But this in the middle of a military campaign, this is what Yaron Finkelman, Major General Yaron Finkelman, this is what he had the time to contemplate. And this is what he found it necessary to do. On the one hand, that's one individual I wish to mention in Israel's upper echelons of command, of military command. The other individual I wish to mention is Major General Aharon Haliva, the head of military intelligence. Both Haliva and Finkelman were privy to all kinds of intelligence and warnings about Hamas's plans, which they discredited and poo-pooed completely. It is reliably reported that Finkelman, the head of Southern Command, at 4 a.m. on the morning of October 7th, was warned of an impending attack and incredibly chose not to inform the military bases and command posts and headquarters on the border with Gaza, that they should be prepared. That, for example, the soldiers should be woken up and get themselves dressed and put on their battle gear and at least be in their positions, some form of defensive position. But they were in their beds, and that's why huge numbers of them were killed, literally in their underwear. So we have, and Haliva was also fully aware of many intelligence reports, which he did not pass on to the Prime Minister, for example. My question to you is: Can Israel in fact succeed in its war against our enemies with such people leading our military?
The short answer to your question is no. We actually can't win this war relying upon the same people who allowed it to happen. Down through the course of history, where countries experienced military disasters, it was common practice to get rid of those generals who either misread the situation or mishandled a situation before they threatened the existence of a state. Now, I'm not suggesting what Stalin did to all the generals that he executed in the beginning of the Russo-German War in June 21st, 1941. I'm not suggesting that at all. What I'm suggesting, though, is that people like Finkelman and Haliva should not only be relieved of command, but they should be arrested and incarcerated until the end of the war, at which point they can be charged with dereliction, at the least with dereliction of duty. They should be court-martialed. There's absolutely real precedence for this. Look, if you look at history, President Abraham Lincoln went through general after general after general until he finally found one, Ulysses S. Grant. that he felt could actually win the American Civil War against the South. And it wasn't considered unusual at the time for this kind of succession of generals to occur until one was finally found that could fight. And the same thing happened, by the way, during the Second World War, with both British and American high commanding officers, mostly in the field, being replaced after failure. This was certainly the case in North Africa with the British, and it was also the case with the United States Navy in the Pacific. So the argument that you can't change horses in the middle of a stream is wrong factually. It has been done. And as far as we're concerned here now, the mistakes that were made were inexcusable by both Haliva and Finkelman.
I would go further. I would go further, Jonathan. I don't think we're discussing mistakes.
No,
we are discussing
charitable. I'm saying they're mistakes.
Well, it's not. It's far too charitable to speak about mistakes. It's not a mistaken assessment of intelligence that presented to you. We're talking about, in the case of Finkelman, for example, spending time giving orders which endanger Israeli soldiers to erase graffiti. That is obviously not a military concern, but what's driving him there is a
political
ideology,
correctness.
an ideology, a philosophy, a worldview, which is at the root of his lack of success as a military commander. The same is true for Haliva.
Let's hold that off for 1 second. And Haliva's recent statements about this really not being a war. I mean, let's leave this off, those two issues, and we'll return to that in just a second. If you look at what Finkelman in particular did, it reminds one of what MacArthur, the horrible mistake MacArthur made, Douglas MacArthur, knowing full well what happened in Pearl Harbor. I mean, Pearl Harbor had already happened, and MacArthur totally failed to take appropriate actions to disperse, for example, the American bomber fleet in the Philippines. And it was later blitzed. It was the Japanese hit them, lined up, wingtip to wingtip, as if Pearl Harbor had never happened. Well, under normal circumstances, a guy like MacArthur would have been, he would have been court-martialed, again, for dereliction of duty. And if it hadn't been for his political connections in Washington, he would have been. Now, with Finkelman, this is why I said, just for what happened, I can't say it was a conspiracy. I can't say that he consciously allowed something to happen October 7th. The man, and I'm going to get a lot of people angry by saying this, but that man and Haliva were fundamentally unfit for their position, whether because of political problems that they had dealing with reality, or whether they were just incompetent and unprofessional. Finkelman, in particular, should be in a military prison right now, getting ready to basically be prosecuted at the minimum for dereliction of duty. As far as Haliva is concerned, Rav, there's something far more sinister going on with him, given his family's connection to the anti-judicial reform campaign. There is something fundamentally sinister in this man's inability or unwillingness to alert everybody to what was happening, to the impending doom that was about to descend on us on October 7th. As far as Finkelman is concerned, there is no question in my mind that he should be in jail right now, military jail, awaiting a court-martial for dereliction of duty. And if found guilty, which he should be, he should do the rest of his life in prison, busted down to the lowest rank possible, with the forfeiture of all his benefits as a general in the army. I think the British called it pour les encourager les autres. I mean, that's the fancy term for it. Lest any other general make the kind of inexcusable mistakes that he made. As far as Haliva is concerned, Rabbi, there's something else going on there. There really is. Because of his family's involvement, deep involvement with the anti-judicial reform movement, it has bothered me that what he did was maybe designed to embarrass Bibi personally and this government in particular.
You'll have to elaborate so that our viewers know to what you refer.
His family, wife in particular, was deeply, deeply involved with the anti-judicial reform movement in the days and weeks and months leading up to October 7th. And he himself was known to be decidedly anti-Israel, anti-Bibi, and anti the conservative government, the coalition. Such a man should have never been in the intelligence community. He never should have been tolerated as the head of military intelligence. The one thing about intelligence that you need is truth, emet. And when you have a man that whose family is steeped in opposition to the current government, and who himself was overheard saying horrible things, both about the prime minister as well as the coalition, he should have been removed immediately. He should have been relieved of command, because nothing he did could have been considered credible or appropriate or trustworthy. Now, as far as Finkelman is concerned, with his latest order to erase the graffiti, I'm at a loss to come up with a response that's not profane to his orders. The minute he gave this order, it proved to me why I have been calling for military reform from the day I got here. Not judicial reform, but military reform. I have argued till I'm hoarse that the generals that we have in the high command are losers. They don't know how to fight. They don't want to fight.
Because they don't believe in fighting. They
don't believe in fighting.
They believe in accommodation and appeasement.
Appeasement, managing the enemy, however you put it.
They do not aspire to victory and to destroying the enemy.
No. A very close friend of mine, Aaron Lerner, has described it in the following way. It's like a warden of a prison that just wants to end the day without an escape or an officer being killed, just so he can go home in peace. These are the generals we have. I have to admit that if Arik Sharon, the old Arik Sharon, were in Finkelman's position on October 6th, he would have mobilized the Southern Command and he would have invaded Gaza to preempt the invasion. But Finkelman wasn't of that mind. And they've advanced one another, similar minds, just like the High Court.
Major General Yaron Finkelman seems to be much more concerned with hurting the feelings of our enemies in Gaza than in guaranteeing Israel's victory.
There it is. He is our version of a woke politician in uniform. That's who they are. That's all who they are. Yair Golan, if you'll excuse me for mentioning his name in front of my Rav, Yair Golan is not an outlier. He is truly reflective of the rot that now currently runs the army.
Please remind our viewers, for those who perhaps are unaware, who Yair Golan was, what he said.
He was in line to become the Ramatkal, the chief of staff, until he opened his mouth up and was accusing Israel of becoming a Nazi Germany.
This was just 5 or 6 years ago.
Correct. And more recently, he described our settlers in the territories as, quote, subhuman. This, under any other rational political or military military organization, should have resulted in him being stripped of his reserve rank and booted out of the army completely. But, his views weren't that radical as far as the high command is concerned. I mean, we have a guy right now in charge in the Shomron, Fuchs, General Fuchs, who is just like Finkelman and just like Yair Golan. These people fundamentally hate nationalist religious Jews. They hate. It isn't a question of dislike or aren't friendly with. They genuinely, viscerally hate national religious people. So when you have a guy like Finkelman saying that he wants the graffiti taken, it's thoroughly understandable. That is what he's concerned with. He's not concerned with his horrible failure that resulted in the deaths of over 1,000 of our citizens and countless numbers of soldiers on October 7th. As far as Haliva is concerned, I mean, it's bad enough what we know about his poor judgment. I'll grant him that. I think it's something else. I think it's a conspiracy to embarrass the coalition government under Bibi. His recent statements kind of denigrating or poo-pooing the fact that we're at war is enough that he should be relieved immediately. And he too, like Finkelman, should be in prison awaiting a military trial for dereliction of duty and maybe something else.
Just
maybe conspiracy.
What Haliva said was that Israel is not fighting for its survival at the present time.
Right. It's not an existential fight.
It's not an existential problem. No, not at all. Obviously not.
I won't dignify that statement with a critical answer, except to say it fully justifies my call for him to be immediately stripped of his command and imprisoned, so that he should await the end of the war for court-martial for dereliction of duty and possibly conspiracy.